we're going to talk about love today, so it was beautiful to see them dance. Lucy and Denise are friends. They go to the same church. And Lucy's actually, her specialty is Irish dancing. So I said, well, maybe we'll ask for an impromptu jig today. But she didn't seem to feel right about that. Mother's Day, what a day filled with emotion, right? It is. It just is. I mean, there are people who don't have their moms anymore. They're not living like me. Or people who always wanted to be a mom. It was the one thing they wanted their whole life, and they never had their own children. There's people who are trying to get pregnant. There's just a lot of emotion packed into Mother's Day, and I just want to say up front, we get it. We know that that is the case. But we're going to celebrate moms today. Do you have the picture of Mother Teresa, or is that coming in a minute? We'll wait. Okay, that's good. I just want to start by saying that some birthdays are better than others. I was glad to turn 59 last month. My mom died at 58. And after spending a year there being her last age, that felt really long to me. I not long ago told my 22-year-old daughter that good looks don't last, and at some point in time your body will give in to gravity. But if you're interesting, that will last forever. So be interesting. These are the kind of things moms say, right? So I've been reading this great book. It's called Bettyville. And when I say a great book, this is not written by a Christian author, okay? It's a great book. And I know some people are. Anyway, George Hodgman has written this book called Bettyville. In it, he talks about his interesting mother. So what he does is he goes home. He's a writer living in New York City. And he goes home to be with his mom on her 91st birthday. And once he gets there, he realizes she's not in the best of shape. Her house is not in the best of shape, and neither is she. So he decides to stay in Bettyville. So here's a few thoughts from his book. My mother has never tried to be anyone but herself. At least I'm out and out with my meanness, she says. I'm not a sneak. I hate a sneak. If Betty turned against you, she would take you on, but if she loved someone, they would never stand alone. Her family did not hug socially, and she is not a woman who cares much for such, nor is she often sentimental. Inside a silver locket she has worn for years, a gift from my dad, are the stock photographs of the strangers it came with. When she speaks of dying, I tell her how sad I will be, and she says, the world goes on. She never mentions my father, dead since 1987. She is always silent about loss. When I was young and getting on her nerves, she'd tell me to go outside and throw something. Her only dream in life was to have a house with a few nice things. My mother always drove fast. She never stayed home. In the old days, we sped across the plains in our blue Impala, radio blaring DJ Johnny Rabbit's All-American Voice on KYOK St. Louis. She took me to the county line where I waited for the bus to kindergarten. My mother stayed in the bathroom fussing with her hair and smoking Kent cigarettes until the very last minute. I look like something the cat drug in, she'd tell herself, frowning in the mirror. When she finally came out, I'd be sitting on the hood of the car, my Batman lunchbox already empty except for wads of foil. I'm a nervous wreck, I'd cry out. Why are you just sitting there, she'd yell at me, as if I were the one delaying things. Those mornings heading to school, I learned to love pop music, a lifelong fixation. I like fast things, and the highway between Madison and Moberly will always be one of the places where I will see my mother, hair wrapped in rollers under a scarf, wearing a pair of sunglasses, taking me off into the big wide world. Mothers. Mine would wrap her hair in toilet paper and bobby pins at night. I never understood the thinking. I was never really sure what effect the toilet paper was actually having on the hair. You see, I grew up in Mary Louville. She only had candy in the house when guests were coming. The shoes she liked were made by Amalfi, her clothes, Act One. And she went through a wig-wearing phase, which really got the best of her one windy afternoon in a grocery store parking lot, when a strong gust blew the wig she was wearing right off her head, and she chased it across the empty parking spaces as if chasing a tumbleweed on a desert prairie. I would have helped her to catch it, but I could not stop laughing. I lived in Mary Louisville when I was a child and when I was an adult. I lived there when my mom was alive, and I continue to live there to this very day, 25 and a half years after she left this earth. So Roberta, tell me where you live. Wait a minute, Ed's going to bring all microphones so everybody can hear and you can feel more embarrassed.
So I live and grew up in Bobbyville, and my mother, I tried to think of 3 adjectives that would really describe my mother, and the first one is colorful. And everything about my mother is incredibly colorful. Our homes were colorful. She was constantly redecorating to put new color into the house and bring beautiful paintings into the house. And everything about her life was colorful. She loved to throw parties. She loved to be a great hostess. She loved to make things perfect for people and make you feel welcome in her home. But most of all, she wanted to make sure you were having fun. So colorful is a really good adjective. Another adjective would be courageous. No matter what happened in our lives when we went through the hardest of times, my mother had grace and poise. And she just stood up and said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And Roberta, you come from a long line of very tough women, so you'll get through anything. And the next word would be devoted. My mother was the most devoted woman to my father. She adored him. She worshiped the ground he walked on. And I have to tell you, if you grow up in a home where love abounds between your parents, you are incredibly blessed. So for any of you children who have that, don't ever underestimate the power of true love, because you get to carry it with you and take it into your home one day. So those are the 3 words, colorful, courageous, and devoted, that make me think of my mother and living in Bobbyville.
Thank you. Megan, where do you live?
Well, my name's Megan. I grew up in Maureenville, and so growing up in Maureenville was one thing was definitely she liked to create an environment of play, and so as kids we had Nerf football that involved all of the cushions from the entire house in the living room. We had Nerf basketball in her newly renovated side of the house. We had soccer, which was a really fun combination of hockey and soccer, that we used one of those blow-up like bounce balls especially after the hardwood floors had been waxed. So it was definitely a place of play. She encouraged play. We rode our big wheels in the house. We had a long hallway with, unfortunately, a huge tall window at the end that my little brother Timmy did go through at one point. But it definitely was a place of play. We rode our scooters in the house, so she created a place of play. Another thing about growing up in Maureenville, it was a place of people. She was, unfortunately, mostly when we were young, they didn't have cell phones with the headsets. So she survived with one of those super long cords that she could take basically from the kitchen to almost every room in the rancher that we grew up in. But she definitely was on the phone a lot, enjoyed talking to people, connecting with people, and even entertaining, having people over. And then thirdly, growing up in Maureenville, it was definitely a place of ideas and thinking. She was a thinker. She liked to think. She liked to know what she thought. She liked to encourage other people to know what they thought. She liked to help other people stumble upon what they thought. And she definitely encouraged us to be thinkers. So growing up in Maureenville was a place of play, a place of people, and a place of ideas.
I asked my friend Esther, who lives in New York and grew up in Gretaville, to explain what it was like. She said, in Gretaville, orange juice cures the cold. Ibuprofen is a vitamin. There's no such thing as being bored. Nothing cures a bad mood like getting your hands in the dirt. Grace is to be said at every meal, regardless of where you are, and you better close your eyes. You do not go to bed mad. You resolve any issues before you sleep. No one can have too many scarves. Thrift stores are way better than regular clothing stores, but always wash the clothes before you wear them. You can make everything an adventure if you blindfold your children and then throw them in the car and not tell them where you're going. And no matter how poor you are, always, always have a vacation fund. We're going to focus this morning on the passage in John 15 that follows the one George spoke on last week when he was talking about the vine and branches, talking about the fruit. Jesus says that fruit is love. And if we abide in him, remain in him, our fruit will be manifest in the love we're able to show one another. Maybe that's why we can feel so far away from God when we're having a hard time loving. The Father is the source of all love. So I'm just going to read through this. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because servants do not know their master's business. Instead, I've called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I've made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command, and that is to love one another. That is hard. I no longer call you servants, because servants don't know their master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. Jesus is letting his disciples know that this is an intimate situation. I don't want to tell anything, my intimate details of my life. I protect personal information. I don't like to give it out on the computer or when somebody in a store asks me. And I'm usually perfectly happy not to know your personal information. So if you're looking to know something personal about us, go to Ed. Ed will share. I look at personal information as being a privilege to know, and I've often criticized female friends for always wanting to talk about what other people are up to. It usually starts like, you know, so-and-so. Sometimes I'll just start the conversation with, hey, just assume I don't know anything about anybody, and let's talk about our lives and our hopes and dreams. I look at private information and conversations as protected, intimate, and I don't have a lot of them. It's kind of like those tribes you read about who don't want their picture taken because they think you're stealing a part of their soul. I feel like I'm stealing something from someone if I give up a confidence. I want to hold it. I want to hold the secret well. That's why this word friend is so potent for me. Friend is different than an acquaintance, a person you know slightly, an associate, a comrade, a colleague in business or at work. And it's different than servant, someone who performs duties for another, a helpful follower or supporter. Friends suggest an intimate relationship, a person whom one knows, a confidant, one with whom there's mutual affection, and that is what Jesus is saying. This is personal. I used to have a friend at work. He died several years ago, but we would talk about faith a lot, and he said he believed in God as creator. He believed in him as being mighty and all-knowing, but he didn't buy the piece about him being personal. It was just too much for him to absorb, and it's a lot, right? When Jesus is talking to his disciples here, I want to picture them in a small room or maybe even a tent out in the wilderness around a fire so that you could just see the outlines of people's faces, as if he's passing on a marvelous secret that soon the whole world will come to hear. Secrets are evidence of an intimate relationship. I'm always asking Ed to tell me a secret. You know how long we've been married? You know how long I've known that man? He's like, really? Yeah. And if he can tell it to me in bed under the covers of the flashlight on, like I used to do with my friends when I was a kid, it's even better. It's one reason getting into bed at night is my favorite time of the day, not just because I'm exhausted and it feels good to lay down, but because there's an assumption that what happens in this room stays in this room. And I like that. Facebook has totally ruined the concept of befriending someone. Everything I've learned from my Father I've made known to you. We are friends, is what Jesus says. So how do we remain in Jesus' love as he has remained in his Father's love? By keeping his commandments. What is the most important? Love. The church is to be a community of love. You did not choose me, I chose you, and I appointed you that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, love. My friend Esther, the one who lives in Gretaville, is single. She told me once she wanted someone to ask her to marry her just once so she could feel chosen. She is already chosen. It's hard for us as the church to not look at the Old Testament and think God equals judgment. It's tough to get the image of all the things that went on before Jesus died on a cross, before Jesus laid his life down for us, his friends, right? It's a big leap from Sodom and Gomorrah being consumed and the whole earth being flooded and fire raining down and the Red Sea swallowing up thousands of soldiers. A big leap from that to this God of love who is commanding us, by the way, to love others. Commanding. Even the word command, doesn't that seem tough? It's kind of no questions asked kind of thing. Talk to somebody who's served in the military. Command. It's that fear of the Lord being the beginning of wisdom kind of thing. God is to be feared not because he's scary, but because what he is saying is significant. It's important. The 10 Commandments, we break them, right? Sure. God knew we would. But he gave them to us anyway. Isn't that interesting? He gave them to us anyway, even though he knew we'd break them. Maybe because it's important information for us to have. Maybe because he loves us and knows that if we follow his commands, we will live a less broken life. A life characterized by love and joy. Let me say here that it is never too late to consider what God commands. Never. Never. There's a second, a third, a fifth, 100th, millionth chance for you. When I was little and up until I went to college, really, my dad's work called him away regularly, and for big chunks of time. I never doubted that he loved me because he was very demonstrative, very verbal when he was home. But as he got older and wiser, he had great guilt over not having been around for us. And here's the good news. He loved God, and he knew the commands of God, and so he started again. He asked for a second chance, and we grew very close in the later years of my dad's life. We talked honestly as much as it is possible for humans to do that. And I felt like his greatest ministry in my life after all of his years of public ministry was the way he loved me at the end. There's a great King Arthur quote. There are laws that enslave men and laws that set them free. The commands of God are designed for our freedom. The church is the body of Christ. We're beloved. We can start again with each other and with him. So how do we remain in Jesus' love so that we will bear the fruit of loving others? How do we remain in anything? How many things have we started in life and not finished? You know, there are things I want to do, but I'm so afraid that if I start them, I won't finish them. I go, no. How do you stay in a long-term relationship with someone? Helen Holden and Susan Krabby are back with the kids today. They've known each other for years. They're super good friends. They've been through a lot. You don't need to know their stories, just know they've been through a lot together. When one has a birthday, the other takes the day off as well, and they celebrate together. That is beautiful. They remain in each other's company. We remain in his love when we remain in his company. If we remain in his company, we will eventually come to value what he values more often. There's no magic formula, but spending time together is pretty critical to the life of a relationship that you are trying to grow. So I was reading in Ezekiel 34 yesterday where God talks about what it means for him to be Israel's shepherd. First of all, he's really mad at the people who've been in charge because they haven't been taking care of the flock. So there's a bunch of chastising he does of them, and he fires them, basically. I'm going to skip over that part. The people had scattered. They were lost. So he finally says, after he reprimands the current shepherds, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them, as shepherds look after their flocks when they are with them. So I will look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places they were scattered. So you get that picture. Staying close to the true shepherd is really important to the well-being of the sheep. Remember Psalm 23? Sarah spoke on, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I lack nothing with him. So stay close to the shepherd. He will look for you, but you know what? The closer you stay to him, the easier it is to actually hear his voice. Pray and listen. Some of us have a really hard time just praying. It doesn't matter what the words are. Some of you think you have to have certain words. There's a song on Christian radio that says, it's a funny term, isn't it? Christian radio. It's not the radio that's a Christian. Okay, Christians, whatever, music. It says, when you don't know what to say, just say Jesus. When you don't know what to say, just say Jesus. Position your heart toward him. This is a discipline. I try to use association because I can easily get distracted. So I like to connect praying to standing outside in my yard at night. So I go out late at night, look at the sky. That's a good time for me to pray. I connect praying when I'm driving alone in my truck. We're easily distracted. Are you? Same with reading the Bible. That's why a lot of people say, I'm going to read at the same time every day. Maybe that's too much for you. A friend gave me a little stack of verses. There's a different verse on each card. You put them in a stand, and you set them somewhere where you spend a lot of time during the day. So I have the stack on my desk. I used to put verses on the dashboard of my truck. Every time I get in or out of the truck, I would read that verse. These are just little things that you can do to help. I was watching Shark Tank the other night, loved that show. And a woman who was selling a health bar got turned down by all the sharks because she was too distracted. She was trying to do too many different things in her life, and the sharks to a person said she didn't have the focus it required to be successful. I want to be successful in remaining in his love. So I have to remove certain distractions. So connecting things like places with prayer, those are helpful to me. Find your way of loving people and get doing it. You will feel the presence of God when you do it. I've been practicing affirmation lately. So what I suggest, again, none of these are, hey, this is how you got to do it. Laurie's got it down. I don't. But if you can pick something that comes natural to you, like you like to affirm people, that might be something. Act. Just step on it. Walk out. Walk out. Chrissy, you love bringing people into your home. You have a mother's heart. You love that. You love Jessica. You love her kids. You're acting on it. That's what we're talking about here. I'm not talking about, when I say I'm trying affirmation, it's not about false flattery, trying to get people to like you. Ooh, I like your dress. Nothing like that. But I'm a hypersensitive, is what I call myself by nature. I'm one of those people that my heart is way out here. It's way out here. And that can get me in trouble. I get hurt easily. There are a lot of things that can happen to my heart. So I'm trying to take that thing that God made me and use it for his good. So I do think it helps me to be sensitive to what other people need to be affirmed about. I'm on the lookout for that. And if you've ever noticed, there's not a lot of affirmation going around, much. Lastly, find a community that will help you to remain in his love. Sometimes we just need somebody else to help flower the garden. When I was really young, I lived in Detroit, and behind our garage, there was this row of lily of the valley. And I remember thinking how perfect those flowers were for somebody my size. You know, they were small, they grow on the ground, they're close where you can pick them, and they smell so good. Unlike some of those lilac bushes in the neighborhood that were really high, and when you picked them, they kind of flop all over. It has taken us years to grow a row of lily of the valley at the house we live in now. We had to move the plants. They weren't getting enough sun where they were over on the hill. And then I noticed a few years ago there was a lilac bush that couldn't get enough, so we had to move that. We had to find a different place. But you see, the growth we're seeing now came about as part of a bigger discussion. Talking to other people who had success with growing these flowers. Yesterday I walked outside and Ed had brought some sunflowers home to plant. I love those. So if you've had a lot of success with growing sunflowers, see me after the service. I feel they probably need a lot of sun. We need to help and flower each other's gardens, to speak into each other's lives. That helps us to remain in his love. Donald Miller says in his book, Blue Like Jazz, the most difficult lie I've ever contended with is this: life is a story about me. The story's about him. We are living in Jesusville, people. We are. Even people who don't know they're living in Jesusville, they are. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. So love each other. Love each other. Start trying. Start acting out. It'll get easier. He'll meet you there.